Can you survive if the doctor says you have stage 4 kidney cancer? Well, here is the living example. You can, because Dave the Broncard asked, where are my damn data? And he looked and he searched the internet, and now he's here. And Dave the Broncard, please tell us your story and what will be the future of the e-patient, because you're well known because you were here already in 2011 at TEDx, isn't it?
Where did my slide go?
Oh, well,
There we
here
go.
it is, here it is, in 2011. And then he was mind-blowing, and I spoke to him several times, and he's still mind-blowing. Dave the Broncard, ladies and gentlemen.
I keep thinking of the Peanuts cartoon where Linus says there's no heavier burden than a great potential, right? If people say it was amazing. It really was. 2011, this crazy Dutchman, Lucian Engelen, has this idea called Patients Included, where he says he will refuse to attend any conference, to speak at any conference, if they don't have patients actively helping to run things. And so he had this TEDx where 40% of the patients, the speakers, were patients, the actual sick people. In the next few minutes, you'll be hearing how exquisitely important it is, as we work on the future of healthcare, to be thinking not just about the technology, but like, what if the people who have the problem have the ability to step into the driver's seat? In that talk, I reviewed just a few of my slides. I showed how I had stage 4. I had kidney cancer metastases all through my body, from my leg, which eventually broke, all the way to my skull. Not a good place to have kidney cancer growing, right? I quoted a famous line, a now famous line, that patients are the most underused resource in healthcare, which is a nice, happy thing to say, but what do we really mean by that? I talked about how when I survived, I had the thrill. I was there. I got to walk my daughter down the aisle at her wedding, which was, I'm just really happy about good medicine. And then Lucian backstage convinced me in the last seconds before I went on stage to do a rap. Give me my damn data, because it's my life to save. And I did that. And yet I came back for more. And I ended with a chant, let patients help. The wording of that was important. I worked in marketing before I got cancer, and I know that whatever facts you want to dispense, people aren't going to hear them if they can't think about it. So if you come across with a message that says patients don't need doctors, or patients know everything or something, they're not going to hear it. But let patients help. Let patients be an active part of the work of care. That's different. Now, I ended the beginning of that talk by going back to 1969, when I was just out of high school and going into college. That was the summer when humanity landed on the moon. First time we ever had that image of the Earth in the distance. And it was also the summer of Woodstock. Crazy time to be a 19-year-old, I'll tell you. And I'm going to be referring to that period of time 3 times in the next few minutes. I want to tell you, though, compared to 2011, a lot can change in 13 years. It is 1/8 of a century. Now, those of you who were good in arithmetic, you know you take 100 years divided by 8, you get 12 and a half. That's 13 years. So, big news. We have figured out what empowerment is, we, humanity, and how to do it. I first learned this definition from other patients at the World Parkinson's Congress in 2013. Look at this definition, because, you know, we talk about patient empowerment. We think, oh, patients are so warm and lovely. Let's give them some coffee and tell them they're wonderful. Well, that's not going to produce any social change. Increasing the capacity of people to make choices about what they want and take effective action. Now, guess where this definition came from? It wasn't from medicine. It was from the World Bank. The World Bank for decades has been going around the world, going into developing nations where the citizens don't know how to grow a government, they don't know how to grow an economy, and this is what they've found. Now, fortunately for me, just 5 months ago, they came out with an important update. And those of you who want to know how do we make patient empowerment work in healthcare, look at this. It's a new brief from the World Bank, and I'll be publishing these slides, that says, in the red boxes there, empowerment happens by removing constraints, the things that have been holding people back. All right, and that they fall into 3 buckets. The first is called agency. It's kind of an awkward word, but what it means is the ability to take action. And in order to do that, people have to believe in themselves that they have a right to speak up, all right, that they are able to speak up, and that they have the skills to do that. Now, we're going to be coming back to what that means for the future of patient empowerment right now. The second thing they need is resources. If you're growing an economy, that means like access to materials and economic things. In our case, underlined there is tools and information, apps, devices, and data. So Give Me My Damn Data shows up here as if I don't have access to my medical records, I am disempowered. See how this works? It's phenomenal to take this from concept to practical reality. And the third thing that is also incredibly important is context. And what that really means in this case is permission. Permission to speak up. The most obvious example in women's and girls' empowerment is if you live under the Taliban, you're not going to have much chance to live an empowered life. All right? And if you are a patient in a medical community where the doctors say, stay off the internet, and by the way, shut up, I'll ask the questions, right? You're not going to be empowered. But that's why the social change, let's go back to the 1960s again, the social change that has happened is so important today. So let's look at these constraints. In 1969, in Boston, where I was in college, the women's health movement was really getting rolling. This woman, Miriam Hawley, I met many years later, she was part of the group of women who founded the Boston Women's Health Collective. And this is her words. We weren't encouraged to ask questions, just depend on the experts. Not having a say in our own healthcare frustrated and angered us. We didn't have the information we needed, so we decided to find it on our own. They went out and collected it. They published a mimeographed book that they called, and there's something really important coming up here, folks. They called it Women and Their Bodies, all right? And it was wildly popular in Boston. But then they had this moment of agency, of realization. They thought, what are we talking about? Women and their bodies. It's our bodies, ourselves. They stepped into the driver's seat. They renamed the book. I am the one. If you were at my TEDx in Maastricht, early in the talk, I said you heard other patients speaking this morning saying, I'll decide what the priorities are, okay? Next item, that was 1969. In 1967, this woman, Catherine Switzer, registered for the Boston Marathon. She didn't know that girls weren't allowed to run in the Boston Marathon at that time. And because she signed with the letter K, they let her in. But then, this famous photograph, the organizer of the race tried to physically throw her out, said, get the hell out of my race. Now, her boyfriend, who's now her husband, blocked the guy, knocked him over. Look what happened. See, the thinking then was, girls aren't athletic. Not only that, but it's not good for them. I just learned this week, I can't remember which of you told me, until 2022, in the Winter Olympics, there was no women's ski jumping. And the official reason from the IOC was because it would be dangerous for women's uterus. Remove constraints and what's possible changes. Look, here's where policy comes in. 5 years after that, a US law was passed called Title IX that said that half of funding for school sports had to go to girls. And look, remove the constraint, a generation later, the US women's team won the World Cup. All right? If your assumptions are wrong, you will miss what's possible. And the most beautiful ending to this particular sequence is that 50 years after, 1967, in 2017, that same woman ran the Boston Marathon again at age 70. All right? So if that guy thought girls couldn't be athletic, my high school athletic director quit when Title IX was passed because he thought, he wasn't particularly sexist. He just thought, this is nuts. He thought girls aren't athletic. Now, of course, girls aren't athletic, so why give them sports programs, as a result of which is all you ever see is girls who don't do sports. Crazy stuff. Anyway, there she is with the same number. So imagine what he would have thought for her to do it at age 70. And the third thing from the 1960s was this movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Extraordinary movie in every sense, especially given the technology that they had to work with. The thing that I'm focusing on here is part of this story. Part of this story was that 3 times in this movie, a monolith appears, a big, black, unexplained stone out of nowhere. And when humanity, or in this case, the apes before the humans, when we touch it, something changes. A new capacity is added, and what's possible from there changes. In this case, when this band of apes touched it, they acquired the ability to use tools, specifically weapons, and beat the crap out of their opponents and become dominant. That level of huge shift. One of the most important monolith moments in the history of humanity was when Gutenberg's press gave ordinary people access to information, which led to Martin Luther with the 95 Theses nailed to the door of the cathedral. And this is what's happening right now, because guess what? We ain't just interested in what the doctors are doing with AI, we're doing it ourselves. You may have seen this story last summer. This kid had a problem from the age of 3 that they had seen. Now, nobody could figure it out. They'd seen 17 doctors and I think 5 or 6 specialties. Everyone was looking in their specialty. Last August, the mom sat down with GPT-4. She was desperate, typed in all the information from all his scans, and it came up with what it turned out was the correct diagnosis. Now, I am not interested in people saying patients should stay off the internet or patients should stop using generative AI because they might see some wrong information. We'll get back to that in a minute. So we started a hashtag, we being my people, started a hashtag campaign, Patients Use AI. Now, most of the articles you'll see about AI in healthcare talk about what y'all are doing for us, and we want to say, excuse me, step aside, hold my beer. Look at the categories of things we have. Patient, administrative burden. I could give a whole talk on each of these. That's where, you know what, we have lots of administrative work to do, documenting things as well. And the leaders among us are using AI to do it. Organizing records for action, comprehension. Hey, GPT, can you summarize this article for me and say it in like 8th grade reading level? Difficult diagnosis and so on. Here's one I came up with myself. To me, it was no big deal, but apparently it's brilliant. We have open notes, all right? I can read my doctor's visit notes, but you know what? They're hard to understand sometimes. So I took all of this and I copy-pasted it from the EMR into GPT and said, please summarize this and find the conditions we're managing and what my next actions are. And look what it did for me, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow, does this make it easier for me to be a good patient? Right? What a wonderful thing to do. And turns out GPT isn't necessarily the best tool for this. There are other things coming along. Next one, Hugo Campos, a friend of mine with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It took me 3 years to learn to say that. It's a bad heart condition that could kill him at any moment. He is very interested in being actively involved and not just waiting for the next doctor visit. Last summer, when all this was brand new, I said, Hugo, everybody's worried that patients are going to get wrong answers because these things hallucinate. And he laughed. He said, Dave, I don't ask LLMs to give me answers. I use them to help me think, to help him think. You want to know what's super ironic? In October, I was at a health informatics conference in Boston, and one of the doctors in another session said, when it comes to clinical decision support, he said, I don't use it to give me answers. I use it to help me think. He said the same thing Hugo did. My point here is we are both working together on the work of accomplishing healthcare. It's a wonderful thing. And then he laughed. He said, Dave, at last I've got autonomy. I can spend as much time as I want on any particular problem. And what he's just done this week, you can Google Howard, my healthcare agent. He wrote a little science fiction scenario of a future day after ChatGPT 6.5 is introduced in 2026. He created a healthcare agent AI tool, and he said the process of creating Howard was laborious. I had to dig up all my information from everywhere and so on. For you who are wondering, how do we start to learn to do better at working with patients? Pro tip number 1, watch what leading users like Hugo Campos are doing. All right? Now, some people will say, well, wait a minute, my patients aren't like that. Don't think that way, right? If you are developing a new cereal product, for heaven's sake, you could look out and say, well, nobody out there is using my product yet. Now, watch what leading users are doing. And number 2, pay attention to chronic patients because they have a triple factor that makes them a very valuable, they just give you a lot of signal on where the value is. They have far more experience. They also have unlimited time, right, to research these things. If they screw up, they have far greater consequence, and they have higher benefit for success. So to bring things to a close, a lot can change in 13 years. In my speech, I showed this picture from my daughter's wedding. But you know what? The following year, she ran the Boston Marathon for the first time, which was a thrill for me. And thanks, but it's not the good part. The good part is that the next year I became a grandfather, and that's the good part. And last Friday, she got her doctorate of education, and I'm glad I was able to be there. Her mother was not able to because she died a year ago from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. This is my first wife. It was sad to not have her there. But then earlier this week on Tuesday, Dr. Lamka of Mayo pointed out how they have a new AI-driven pancreatic cancer detection routine. Things are evolving fast. Lives are at stake. Right? We all need to be thinking ahead. And I'll tell you, in a minute, I've got the most important tip you may come away from this week. For the end of this talk, I asked GPT to create an image of a determined woman. Did you know the Hunger Project, which for 40 years has been trying to solve world hunger, finally figured out that the most important thing to end hunger is to empower women in the local villages. Because if you do that, then the food and money that arrives actually reaches the people who need it. So, a determined woman emerging from the waves of social change, escaping the shackles of the past, fueled by information. And here's what it came up with for me. I love this image. This is the empowered patient, somebody like Hugo Campos, finally breaking through. Here's what you need to do. Yesterday, one of our speakers, who was it, Stephanie, I think, said, how many of us are actually using generative AI, ChatGPT, and only about a quarter of the hands came up. Folks, you will not understand what patients are already doing. All right? If you're not using it yourself, learn to ride the new horse. All right? Or you're going to be out of date. And if you're smart enough to come to a leadership and future conference like this, for heaven's sake, take home the message, get on and learn how to do this. I ended the talk by saying, let patients help. And I'll expand that today with let patients help do the work of healthcare in the age of apps and AI. Patients are end users of artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dave, you are a curious person and you know how to use the internet, but there are still a lot of patients who think that, oh, that's so difficult. I'm lost at the internet. How do we teach the patients?
Well, part of my, so this is what
They know now that they have to ride a new horse.
we'll see. We'll see, because knowing is different from doing, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It's literacy, right? It's the Gutenberg, there was no market for Gutenberg's books until people learned to read. And when that happened, it wasn't right away. It was decades later that Martin Luther did what he did, and that all led on to the Reformation. Start the work. We're leaders. Teach people how to do it.
So
I'll tell you,
message to patients' organization is use those language models.
Well, I have no resources. I have no big nonprofit or anything like that. I would welcome anybody who wants to take these ideas and use them on your own, right? Start teaching each other and grapevine, talk to each other about, here's how I did. Just start blogging, right? I ask this question, and if you watch Hugo and what he does, the beautiful thing, if you haven't used it yet, the beautiful thing about working with a large language model compared to a search engine, you can ask the same question, but then you can talk back. You can say, wait, I don't understand what you said about this. Could you say more about that? Right? And they are programmed to be helpful, so they never say, you idiot. Well, I don't know about you, but there are times when I won't ask a question because of that. And that's what Hugo means. He can spend an unlimited amount of time pursuing questions, right?
And that's also what you have to learn.
Yes.
Shall we go to the room?
You're the boss.
Well, not completely. Vragen van u. Sorry, Diederik. Put the mic to the mouth, please.
Hi, I'm Bart Timmers. I'm a GP. First of all, I want to thank you for being a better doctor the last 13 years after your talk in 2011. The question I have, when I think of the USA, I always think of a place full of lawyers, more lawyers than doctors. What's your experience with if you ask a doctor to do something he isn't used to do, he's bound to his rules, and you ask him to do something that's not in his rules. Do they answer your question, or do they do their own thing?
So my
Can they
experience
think out of the box?
well, my experience may not be anybody else's. I know it's not uncommon for some doctors to say that's not how we do things. Some doctors are obnoxious. Some people say, that's a good question, I don't have time for that. But others increasingly, and I've seen a big shift in the last eighth of a century, will increasingly say, that's a good question, let's explore that. One doctor said to me, I don't know, let's look. And he went on the internet right there, then and there with me. It's culture change, right? Culture change starts with small changes. Women's empowerment is a great example. But still a half century later, you can have the IOC saying women's uteruses can't tolerate ski jumping. So get in there. You can become one of the voices saying, let's do it differently.
Yeah.
Right?
Other questions? Okay, go back.
Hello, Bart.
Hi, Dave. Second Bart here. Shall I hold it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my question is a little bit moving on his question, and it was a question that I might have asked also from Gupta, and it has to do with liability. Doctors, of course, feel responsible for what they do, and they're liable for what they do. But how about technology? And do you have a view on if you put technology in the hands of patients, which I think is, well, no need for that to say that's a very good idea. But how would technology providers have to deal with the liability problem? Do you have a view on that?
I have no expertise on that subject. I know my personal opinion. To me, Now, every time we have new technology, there's a new way for people to get killed. Cars are a good example. And we work our way through it. I don't have any information about what the laws are. I do hope that, see, the more everyone involved in all that work becomes a user, the more they understand what they're trying to regulate. It's just really bad if somebody tries to regulate something that they keep on the other side of the glass wall.
So break through the glass ceiling. Gabrielle.
Sorry. I'm Gabrielle Speyer. I'm working as a clinician. Amazing, Dave. We spoke last week. What's your opinion about the doctor and the patient relation? Do you think they both together have to learn how to ride the horse? Or do they have to do that separately? And what's your take on that?
No, I think that's an excellent question. So, as some of you know, I'm a founder of the Society for Participatory Medicine, which is about doctor-patient collaboration. And we often have a metaphor that it's like new dancing lessons. When I was a little kid, my mother dressed me up and took me to formal dancing lessons in little white gloves. I was so cute, and boy leads, girl follows, right? When I got to college, turns out the ladies had some opinions of their own about who was going to do what when. Well, it's a valid thing, and as we tried to figure out how do we do this differently, we sometimes literally stepped on each other's feet, right? But if we were both committed, see, what's at stake here, all this talk about nurse burnout, physician burnout, and so on, there's patient burnout also. What if, and I'm not kidding, this is starting to happen, what if we all share the work, all right? Where it's not so much a matter of, all right, you're not in charge of this anymore, I am, or something, but we're all working on it together. The real future that I see, plain as day from my own work, we know Epic yesterday, Seth Hain talked about their system listening and generating a transcript, all right? I get care at 4 different locations, and 2 of them have a scribe, a human right now, who does that. And in those ones, the doctor pays attention to me. In the others, the doctor doesn't have that luxury. The real future, and it fits in with Hugo's scenario that he blogged about, is where the robot, I'll call it the robot. My wife and I call all our devices robots. Google Maps is a robot to us. The robot listens, generates a transcript, right? But what I want is not just the summary, because they're making it generate a summary for the clinician as well, but I want it to spin off a copy in my language. And not only that, but I want the thing to remember when we schedule the next appointment, what should we be following up on, right? And I don't know if that's, I don't know if I may have lost track of your original question.
No, not at all. Not at all, Dave.
Okay.
Last question for Lucia.
Okay. Well. Hey, buddy. Thank you again, of course. So.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
What next?
Yeah. Well,
He doesn't ask you to rap.
It's also about the portability of data, to name one of those.
Yes.
One of the things that you're very passionate about is the work that Stacy has done together with the QR code, combined with the IPF, the International Patient Summary. Give us a brief glance about that, and I know you got a QR code in your pocket.
I love this. So part of my work these days is I'm involved with HL7, which is the global standards organization that's writing the software standards for how health data will move between computers. I was at one of their meetings a year and a half ago working on medical device data, and we were testing blood pressure devices, and all of a sudden I found out I was having a blood pressure emergency right then and there. So I went to the emergency department at a local hospital, and they were barcode scanning everything and getting me checked in, and then they handed me a paper clipboard. Ugh, right? But what are you going to do? Because those systems haven't been designed yet to have any sensible, they're all inward looking. I came back to the HL7 meeting and complained to everybody, and they said, well, you know, we have this standard called IPS, International Patient Summary. It has all your profile information, your medications, your allergies, and what we dreamed up was the idea of making the IPS available to me, not just to the hospital departments, and putting a QR code on it so that once it's on a URL, I can just have a QR code like my vaccine card. And at the HIMSS conference in Orlando a few months ago, they were demonstrating this. This QR code now, right, links to my IPS. And Epic has not made a big announcement to it, but next year they're going to be reading this. So if somebody hands me a clipboard, I can say,
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
One tiny point on this, and this gets down to patients included, all right? The technical people thought, what's the big deal? That's easy. And our thought was, it's a big deal to us. Let patients help make the decisions. See what I mean? But if you bring us in afterwards, it can be years later that somebody realizes, oh, the IPS would be useful in the patient's hand.
Thank you, Dave.
I get passionate.
Yeah, thank you, Dave de Bronkart, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye-bye.